Today we have a story that is a little bit different, but like all of our stories, we believe it deserves a moment to be talked about and remembered. As we've discussed many times here, coal has had a deep-rooted effect on the Appalachians in good and bad ways. It kept people alive and fed when it was needed, but it came with a price. People have had a long history with coal. Coal is a fossil fuel that started forming around 359 million years ago. Stone and Bronze Age flint axes have been found embedded in coal, evidence that people were using it for fuel long before the Roman invasion. In the 13th century, coal seams were found along the shorelines of northern England, and settlers dug them up and then followed them inland under cliffs and hills. This was the very earliest beginnings of drift mining. But with the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century, coal mining exploded, providing fuel for steam engines, transportation, and home heating. With this need of fuel came mining. With mining came a burden to produce, and to do so fast as possible. So today we're talking about the forgotten victims of the mines, and that's the animals. Oxen, mules, and what were called pit ponies. Pit ponies were widely used all over the world, and not quite as much in America, but they were used in the Appalachians and desert areas mainly in America. In early years, men, women, and children worked in the mines until laws were enacted to protect the women and children more. As productivity improved and underground haulage needed increased, horses and ponies began to feel the need that losing the women and children left. The first records of ponies being worked in mines was in the north of England around 1750. Horses were used on a large scale after the 1842 Mines Act that abolished the underground employment of boys under 10 and all females, but they were used as far back as 1600s. Horses and ponies were integral workers in coal mines, not only in England and Wales, but in Canada and the United States. Taller ponies and horses would work thicker coal seams with higher ceilings, and smaller ponies and horses worked seams with low ceilings. But this wasn't always the case, because taller horses would become injured by scraping their heads and backs on the low ceiling roadways. Miners spoke of horses scraping the tops of their heads on the ceiling so that flesh would be hanging and bone exposed sometimes. In really low tunnels, they would get jammed by their withers. Injuries often got infected in the dirty air and required veterinarian treatment, or sometimes in more drastic situations, they would use a syringe kerosene oil, which seemed to absorb the pus and discharge. Occasionally, a horse would pick up a bacterial infection. Horses used in the mines were either cured of the illness or injury, or they were euthanized if they broke a leg or something that was not fixable. Any horses that were unwanted or unsuitable would be offered to local residents who were more than willing to take them and use them or take them to market. Though this is tough to hear, it's facts, and this is what happened. While treatment of the ponies varied from mine to mine, they were usually adequately cared for because the operators understood that their working efficiency was directly related to their animals' health. There was further incentive given the cost and time involved in purchasing and training a replacement for an injured or sick pony. Many miners complained that management was more concerned about the pony's care and safety than they were with the humans, since you could replace a man any time back in those days. But horses were harder to replace because they would have to learn how to work the mines. Some mines had underground stables where the horses and ponies were housed for most of the year. They were brought to the surface and turned out to pasture when work slowed down. A stableman was in charge of the underground stalls, and it was his responsibility to make sure there was a good supply of feed and water and care for the animals. While other mines would transport the ponies up and down the shifts, much like they did the miners themselves. I'm sure this was very scary. Pit ponies and horses developed unique skills. They learned how to turn around in small spaces. They responded to verbal commands, and they would open ventilation doors. And they worked sometimes in total darkness, but they knew their way around. Some ponies rendered blind from working in the caves from injury would learn to rub their noses against hard stones to feel their way to where they were going and where they needed to turn. A typical work day was about 8 to 12 hours. Life in the coal mines has never been easy for either man or animal, but few horses have received better care and respect than the pit pony in some larger mines, mostly in Europe. A pony would be bred, born, and put to work without ever seeing the light of the sun. Not ever. So these days, ponies are frequently seen grazing on farms near coal mines, and most of these little rugged ponies are descendants of pit ponies, which were used to haul coal as early as the 1600s when coal was first mined in America. Breeds such as the hardy Shetland ponies from northern Scotland were imported in great numbers to work in the mines of Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, and Kentucky. These horses, or pit ponies, were deprived of experiencing the sunlight and fresh air. Instead, they lived in darkness underground, relying on their instinct and guidance of their human partners. These horses were born, worked, and perished in the dark, enduring strenuous labor. It was not uncommon for a single horse to pull up to 8 heavy coal wagons alone. Despite their challenging circumstances, these animals maintained their dignity and were aware of their rights, such as refusing to move if they felt burdened with excessive weight or wagons. They also possessed a remarkable sense of time, knowing when their workday should end and finding their way back to the stables, even in the darkness. This demanding work of horses in the mines continued until 1972, when technology took over, marking the end of an era. On December 3, 1972, Ruby, the last miner's horse, emerged from the mines in a grand fashion. Accompanied by an orchestra, Ruby adorned a flower wreath and was brought out of the darkness, symbolizing the conclusion of an era of mining horses and their partners. Unfortunately, the area of pit ponies is not quite over. Today, in areas of Pakistan, thousands of donkeys still toil in the coal mines where they work the coal seams inside the Salt Ridge Mountains. Rather than being hitched to coal cars, the donkeys carry the heavy sacks of coal throughout the narrow tunnels. It is hard, hazardous work. Artist Mick Petts used 60,000 tons of material to create a stylized sculpture of a pony in a Welsh park. The earthwork honors all the ponies and horses that worked in coal mines. Today we honor the voiceless and innocent lives that came and went and continue to work for humans with very little return besides being allowed to exist today in a small way on a little channel on YouTube. We honor you. Thank you for watching today, and we hope that you enjoyed this little video and maybe learned something. Until next time.